Everybody, welcome to the Church Digital Podcast. My name is Jeff Reed, and it is a pleasure to have you join us again today. We've got a great episode, and I'm excited about today's guest. Once again, I do have Ray DiArmas joining us as a co-host. So, hey, Ray, you want to say hey to everybody?
Great to be with you guys again. Excited.
Ray's got such an amazing podcast voice.
I appreciate that, Eric. Thank you.
Good stuff. Hey, we already tipped him. I thought we were going to play another game. Guess the host. I was guess the guest. So, hey, guess the guest. That's weird. Hey, we've got Eric Geiger, Reverend Eric Geiger from Mariners Church, lead pastor on the podcast today. I am moving up in the world. I called in a bunch of favors to get this guy in here, and I'm excited.
Oh, come on. It wasn't that hard, dude.
Hey, listen, Eric has, we used to work together at Christ Fellowship Miami back in the day before even Simple Church was a thing, or maybe Simple Church was coming a thing. I'm not actually sure how that rolled out.
Yeah, it's around the same time. It all
somewhere around together. Yeah. So Eric was executive pastor at Christ Fellowship Miami, where I was production guy underneath him. And Ray, you had some time with Geiger down there as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I consider Eric to be a huge influence on my life in ministry. Just phenomenal. Very good stuff.
Dude, thanks, man. Thanks both you guys.
So we're going to do a little surprise here. Let's play the game of best Eric Geiger story. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to do it. Because, yeah.
When it comes to tech, I mean, Jeff, there is, the problem is, I think you were the one who coined the phrase, the curse of the Geiger.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Only because mics kept going bad whenever I spoke.
I will attest to this, that I have never seen anyone with as much bad luck when it comes to tech as Eric Geiger.
Yeah.
And as much as the bad microphones are, it's not nearly as bad as Spanish soap opera on the screen.
Oh, that was crazy.
In the middle of your message.
I was preaching and a Spanish soap opera popped up on the screen behind me.
Oh my goodness.
Literally. No audio, just the video.
Theologically, now Jeff, you weren't in charge of that at the time.
No, I was not. I was a mere volunteer. I cannot be held responsible for that.
But James, who was at the time, who's a great guy. I mean, he even looked at me like I just never in my life have I ever thought that would happen. So theologically, it's either the Lord loves me a ton and he trusts that I can be sanctified by those things, and the enemy's really out to get me because I'm being used by the Lord, or I just have a whole lot of sin in my life. It's like one of the two things, right?
Or it could be that the Lord wanted to reveal that Carlos Ponce, famed soap opera star, is a member of Christ Fellowship.
Yes.
And show him in all of his glory.
Show him during a sermon.
Maybe a little bit of humility involved in the conversation, but we'll just roll on from there.
Yeah.
Hey, so here's what we wanted to talk about here at the Church Digital Podcast and try to have some semblance of conversation involved in this. So Eric, I feel like I'm going to call him Geiger for the episode, and I apologize, but that's what I've called him for a decade plus. He wrote an article in response to a Dave Amundsen article about Omnichurch, and it was this great thing. And I read the article, and I was like, man, I got to get Eric on here because I want to really hone in on a couple of these points talking about Omnichannel, and Geiger transported into moving Omnichannel into Omnichurch, which I love. But hey, I know Ray DiArmas is like every time we talk about Omnichannel, he like lights up and goes crazy here on the show. Mm-hmm. So Ray, man, a 2-minute overview. What is Omnichannel? So
the idea of it basically is that you're looking at your online church and your local church, and Eric, feel free to correct me here, just a little bit more unified light in terms of the way that people are encountering and experiencing not just the sermon content, but even some of your discipleship content. Different organizations like Home Depot. I love using Home Depot as an example. When I buy something from homedepot.com, when people ask me where I got it, I say I bought it from Home Depot. Whether I went into the store or whether I got it from their website, to me, it doesn't matter. I just tell them where I received it from. And so in the same way, churches, not just through their content, but even through community, have some pretty unique opportunities by keeping their discipleship process and everything aligned in digital spaces and not just in physical spaces. And so, Eric, can you tell us a little bit more as far as how you view Omnichannel in the church and how some of that's broken or even kind of changed your mind on things?
No, you described it perfectly. So, Omnichannel would be, it was a word initially designed for e-commerce and marketing saying, hey, it doesn't matter where the customer interacts with Home Depot or Best Buy or any company. They don't care which channel you're in, as long as you do commerce with them and have a relationship with them. So if you apply omnichannel to church, you necessarily, to the extreme degree, you wouldn't care if the person connected to your church via some social channel, as long as they interacted with the same content. You wouldn't care if that was live or via social. You just wanted the interaction to happen. The deeper layer, which I didn't spend a lot of time talking about on the blog, because you don't have time to really process it, is even in an omni-channel strategy like Warby Parker, for example. If you look at them selling glasses, they open up brick and mortar. So they started online and they moved to brick and mortar. So it's not only brick and mortar companies like Home Depot who then moved to online. You have online companies that move to brick and mortar. And the reason they move to brick and mortar is because they actually feel, or research has told them, that the conversion rate is higher in brick and mortar than it is online. So online, you might have a conversion rate, if you go to Warby Parker website, you might have a conversion rate of 8%, 10%. They use the word conversion differently than we would in the church, right?
Sure.
But meaning that somebody who goes to Warby Parker site would purchase maybe 8 to 10% of the time. But in a brick and mortar store, it's usually 50% or higher. And so they're like, man, we want to have that. We want to have that level of engagement. So even e-commerce, you're actually hearing more of a term called unified commerce now instead of omnichannel, which is basically all the channels are unified. But even they are like, hey, we want brick and mortar because of the high level of engagement that it produces. So if you apply it to a local church, it wouldn't make you want less face-to-face interaction. It would make you really still value face-to-face interaction, because you have some that started online and are moving to face-to-face because they realize the value of it. That's one. The second thing, and I did mention this in the article Jeff talked about, I do think we have to be careful with the term. It's a helpful term. I'm not against the term. I use the term, but every example you and I have given, we are looking at companies whose role is to have a customer.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to view the kingdom like we're creating customers, or that a church is about a customer. Listen, I'm using the term. I'm just saying we need to carefully use the term, because we really are. I think Jeff Reed's got a famous tweet about, hey, if all we're doing is sitting around, if we're not making disciples, we're just a bunch of guys throwing. What's that tweet, Jeff? Come on.
If we're not doing discipleship, we're just a bunch of guys sitting around throwing parties on the weekend. I mean, I'm not saying it's a powerful tweet, but it lives out there. And this is the thing, man, like we just fast forwarded to the end of the podcast. I was saving the stuff towards the end, but hey,
let's just jump in the deep end, man.
It's great. So like, I would say to this, that you're right. Church as a whole, when they're doing church online, we're creating content. And as a result, because it's content, we're creating consumers online. But when we try to say things like, hey, I can't tell you, Eric, how many pastors I've talked to have said, no, we're not doing small groups online. That's not my job. I'm not responsible for discipling people online. You can't do that. And so it's like we can't do ministry, but ministry is what validates what we're doing with our content to make it a viable opportunity to change somebody's life for real, to disciple them.
And I want to be consistent. So like, I'm going to sound like I'm talking on both sides of my mouth a bit, but I'm really just want to be consistent. Sure. So the reality is some of our worship services create consumers too. So we have to be careful that if we're going to say that about online, that we also don't say, really, how different is it really than the worship service that we have? So I'm cool with it creating those conversations. Now, if the worship service is not only about content, but there's times of prayer and there's times of connection and there's times after where there's relationship building, then it is more than about just the content. But if the worship service is designed only for the content, then you really can't look at online as if it's inferior.
It's very true. And it's difficult for people to understand that, because even, for instance, we're saying content. A lot of pastors would struggle through that and say, but I prefer the theological term sermon or something along those lines.
Okay, say sermon then. Yeah,
exactly. And well, it may be indifferent to us, but even they struggle in terms of the theological implications of how some of that lines up and how it hits somebody. Can you talk about and just kind of give a view in terms of the theology behind why this is a great idea to put our content or our sermons online, and why we need to provide a next step for people in terms of what's next for them in their spiritual growth, even if they're not in the room?
Yeah. So I always respect when people are consistent in their theology. So for those who are against quote unquote online church, and they're consistent, they don't put their sermons online, and they're just really careful to be sure it's not called church, because they theologically are, hey, the word ekklesia means the gathering, and this isn't a gathering. I respect the consistency of that view, so that's where they're coming from, is that, hey, it's not truly church because it's not a gathering, Now, typically that view also believes that a church shouldn't have multiple services, even, because a church really is one gathering of a group of people. And so if you have multiple services, it's not one gathering. So it's really like multiple churches, so that would be that camp, or that argument. For me, I look at it as, just want to be sure I separate missiology and ecclesiology. So for sure, I don't think we would want to say there's any problem with putting your services out there from a missionary context, like when the radio went live for the first time and C.S. Lewis ministered to a bunch of people and during World War II and helped people wrestle with the claims of the Christian faith, or when television went live and Billy Graham started broadcasting the gospel. No one criticized that, I don't think so. And so online, it really is. I mean, everyone's walking around with smartphones now. And so we have an opportunity to put the gospel in a context that's super accessible to people. It's just a question of if you're going to use that as equal to the physical experience.
In your opinion, what's the negative with church online? Like, so if church online is less than, and you've not said whether it is or isn't, and so
right.
let's just pretend it's not. I'm not going to date you, but you're older than me, so you're mid-40s. You're welcome for that. And so you're a senior pastor, and so people in your age, when your range, some have issues, some don't. What are the issues that church online needs to overcome? So what are the negatives that's keeping it from being the same as a physical expression of church?
Yeah, I think, the first would be the theological. So just to realize that there's a camp of people who do make a great solid argument that it means gathering, and therefore it can't be digital, right? So there's that. But I don't think, Jeff, you'll ever win with those. The online is going to win with those. Yeah. So put the theological. That's one group, and then there's just the practical. It's people who are like, man, I just know personally I'm not super connected, or I know personally I passively watch a television show, and I don't want people to passively watch my a sermon, or I know that that when I watch something on Netflix, I'm vegging and I'm not like connecting with a whole lot of people. With those who theologically aren't looking at this from a theological struggle, they're looking at it from a practical struggle. What online church has got to overcome is helping people connect, not just listen to content. But even to the theological crowd, I'd say, hey, can we be on the same page that putting the message of Jesus out into a whole lot of places can we all agree from a missiological standpoint, like just getting the message out, it's good. And I believe most are like, oh yeah, absolutely do that. It's just when you then move it from its missiology to its actual church.
Right.
That's when then that you first have to have the theological conversation, and then if you get over that hurdle, there's then the practical conversation.
So the theological definition of church would be more centered around the 1 hour on Sunday.
Ekklesia is really two, it's the word for church in the New Testament. There's
Gathering.
it actually means the called out ones, but then it also, it means the gathering. So like there's a, I'm not saying anything that people haven't already gone public with, like Mark Dever, who I respect at Capitol Hill Baptist. Like he's against the multiple campuses, which, I'm not against. And, because he believes that the church means he's the pastor of a gathering. So he would only have one service. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't have more than one service. You see what I'm saying? Because the church has to be able to gather together.
I guess the thing that I would wrestle with this, and I know it's different, and I've friends who are connected with Dever in that school of thought, and I don't want to make it about Dever, but it's where does discipleship come into play with this? Because yes, church is the gathering of coming together in a corporate body, but do we not have a personal mission and a calling to go and share and create community on our own? And whether that's bringing it in or going out and investing, like where does that lose its flavor in context of online? Because everything that we've talked about is still centered around this 1 hour service, which is funny. I would actually say that my church isn't the church where I'm sitting in a pew for that 1 hour on Sunday. My church is the collection of 6 or 8 people that I connect with on a regular basis and live life with in context of the Bible and learning about that. So like, where am I theologically not lining up in context of online, or is it just an evolution where some people aren't going to get it and we're theologically okay on the other side?
Yeah, I think that it would be like, hey, just, I would want to respect people where they are theologically on that. Mm-hmm. And I personally, where I am, I want to use the tools of the day. Mm-hmm. Titus 1, to the pure, all things are pure. To those who do not believe, nothing is pure. And so basically the online can be used for pure things, and it can be used for not pure things. And I would love to use it for pure things. And I think the church is for sure the mission of the church. And then obviously I want to wrestle with wisdom on how the tools are used to fulfill functions of the church. Right. So functions of the church gathers for worship, the church gathers for community, the church lives on mission. How can the online tools be used to help those functions? I'm great with those conversations, and I think those are the right conversations. We're in a really crazy day now where the average attender of a church used to be someone who went like twice a week. Like when I got in the game 20 years ago, when I was, a 20-year-old youth pastor, a good church member went twice a week. You used to tell people on Sunday mornings, don't only be a Sunday morning Christian, like get plugged into something else. That was a normal thing to say. Now, man, the data is just really staggering. If a pastor will look at it, the best way to track it is to just pull out, because you check in your kids every week, is to pull up the number of kids in your church and see how many, like look at the last sermon series you did, and then look at the percentage of people who came all 5 or 6 weeks of that sermon series. And I promise you're going to be overwhelmed with, unless you've already done it, you're going to be shocked at the people who are just not as consistent as what you perhaps think that they are. Right. And so do you want to use online to keep that? Like if you worked your tail off as a senior pastor in a sermon series, do you want that content to be accessible to people outside of the gathering? Just look at the data, and you probably will want that, Yeah. I know I do.
Eric, one of the things that I appreciated about working underneath you is that you always had a strong drive towards guiding people through the discipleship process. And you talked about how people are, maybe once a monthers or twice a monthers in terms of their regular times. How can folks leverage that online content to help people take next steps to maybe increase their opportunity to being there on a regular basis?
It's the right question. And I think it's something I'm wrestling with here. Our team's wrestling with here. We want to do more than just like use online as a way to rebroadcast our sermons, which we are doing that. But how can we use things that we're creating to help people take an even additional step? And so we're testing some things. Like I did a series in Romans 8. And the third week was the famous, you got to kill sin or sin will kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a 40-minute message, but there's a lot of stuff you can't really hit on that weight of a topic in 40. So we did a Facebook Live, additional content after the message for people to tap into. And it was like 20 minutes of walking through the famous book by John Owen, Mortification of Sin. So we actually didn't just rebroadcast the content, but we provided some additional content, and we viewed that as a next step. But that's just one test. I don't know if anyone's really nailed this yet. We do need some churches to nail this so that we can have some examples. And I don't know if we'll be one that does or not. At least I don't know if we'll be a pace setter or not. But I'd like to use the tools to help people take next steps.
Well, I tell you what, Eric, just even one thought. How many multi-sites are you now there at Mariners?
Well, we see. I mean, some of them are plants that don't have the name Mariners now, and so we spun some off. So that carrying Mariners name would be 3 others. Okay.
Well, and even on the plant side, like to me, I would look at Church Online as a way to plant campuses and or churches. Start to look at the equations, the locations, to see where you're getting people together. And so, like, if you got people,
do that, Jeff, how hard? Like, I'm actually asking for wanting to know myself, but also if I'm a regular, I'm thinking about regular pastors like me who are listening to this. How hard is it to see those demographics? How hard is it? Is it back-end tools on your website so any web host can tell you where they're watching from?
Yeah, I mean, Google Analytics can drill into that, and that's Google Analytics is free. You just put it in an embed code on your website and back into CMS, and Google gives you those reports on a regular basis. And so any given Sunday, you can know where people are pulling from. Now there's other stats and other things like how long they watched, some of that stuff that you can pull in from other sources. But
so that's a good. That's a good step. So if I'm a senior pastor listening and I'm like, man, that would help me with my strategy. That's something that they could contact you on, and you could that's something you could consult somebody on. Like, hey, let me set up Google Analytics for you. This is going to help you know where you could launch something in the future.
Sure,
that'd be great. Definitely.
And so part of this also is as a result of that, once you know where these people are, start to cluster them together into like a micro location, a house church, a microsite, meeting in a home, meeting in a conference room, work conference room, just different areas, and start to cluster, whether it's small group curriculum, whether it's actual doing church services, watching and experiencing it together, doing a watch party or something. You're creating these physical locations. You're talking about Ekklesia as a separation from it's lacking the community in context of online. Whereas I would actually pitch there are options where online births these Ekklesias around, these communities around. And whether you're clustering this for a church plant or a microsite, all of a sudden online is the vehicle that's helping you create these pockets of growth instead of pulling away from and hindering.
So if it's truly a unified experience, if you take Omnichannel church, that's that idea to the furthest thing here, yet you're committed to a discipleship process. So you have both. You believe in the tools and you have a process. You could have somebody who every week they watch at home every single week. That's the service they attend.
Right.
Yeah. Their next step is to be in a group, and they then show up on Tuesday nights to a physical group, right?
Yep.
Then their next step is to serve or to do outreach in the city, and truly omnichannel church would be they can ebb and flow between physical and online environments throughout the whole process.
Correct. And still feel like they're part of the church,
Yeah.
which is significant.
But the wrestling currently is most people, when they hear online church, they're only thinking the weekend service. They're only thinking one step of the discipleship process. They're not thinking the whole thing.
That's right.
And let me just throw this out there. Sorry, Ray.
No, it's all right.
Is that not even a fair statement? Let's just be honest. Is that not even a fair statement in context of church, where churches itself defines itself a lot by that 1 hour on Sunday, and maybe not so much, maybe it's not to the extent of church online, but there are churches out there that struggle with that ideology.
Agreed. I think that's why I said it would have to be a church that's coupled with, like, church for us is not this one thing. It's an overall discipleship process.
Yeah. And that's where, and I'm glad Jeff brought that up, because that's some of the struggle that we've seen overall. And I think in the last few years is there are a lot of people who've considered church just, hey, I come for the content. I come for the worship and for the word. And I don't necessarily have any kind of interaction with believers throughout the week, or there's nobody who's necessarily helping me grow in my faith in Christ. It's just this 1 hour of interaction. And this is where not just church online, but church in general can become a dangerous place, where I've even really come to appreciate like the work that Robbie Gallaty has been doing and just trying to help people grow in their faith by getting them into community, even where they're at, and helping people take those next steps. That's why those things can be so crucial, whether it's, through an online platform for our folks who travel, because we've seen that, or whether they're able to gather in person, just because of they need that kind of accountability.
Yeah, that's good.
How do you, as a lead pastor, so, Mariners is huge, like, and just in the context of size, California, you've got a wide varying range of people that attend, different demographics, how do you make a decision for something like this? Like, theologically, I'm agreeing with this. I'm not agreeing with this. Once again, I don't want to put you on the spot for a decision in a direction, but more of what decisions, because realize the people that are listening to this are technical people that need to convince someone like you of what the way that they think. And so coach me through here. How can we connect with you as a high level leader to show you some of these things to get you to understand?
That's a great question, man.
Hey, everybody, this is Jeff with the Church Digital. We're going to break the interview right here. That was a great question. The answer was even better, honestly. And so rather than to go through an entire conversation here as Eric Geiger eloquently answers that question and all the conversations afterwards, we're actually going to break the episode. We're going to come back because we just had a great episode in context of Omnichannel and unified church. But the conversation that's coming next as we talk about how to talk to your leadership about church online, honestly, it's just a whole other episode into itself. I honestly thought I was landing the plane with something simple, and it wasn't, but it was awesome. So you definitely want to check out the next episode. We're going to wrap episode 9 right now. Episode 10, Ray DeArmas from Christ Fellowship Miami, Eric Geiger, lead pastor, Mariners Church, and myself, diving into that, how to talk to your leadership. Hey, if you got any questions on this past episode, check out the show notes. Don't forget, while you're there, subscribe to this podcast, man. Support it. Feel free to leave a review as well, as that helps us get the word out and helps us get this content in front of other eyes. But for Eric, for Ray, my name is Jeff. Thanks for listening.